when the living embodiment of grit and grace sat face to face with one of television's most unfiltered hosts. Sparks were inevitable, but no one in the studio expected an inferno. What began as a routine interview quickly became a brutal test of patience, wit, and dignity as Clint Eastwood found himself under relentless fire from Joy Behar. The legend showed why you never poke the lion too many times. The studio buzzed with energy as audience members settled into their seats. Every chair was filled, every phone poised to record. This morning was special. Clint Eastwood, a name that commands reverence, walked onto the stage at 94 with quiet, powerful confidence born from a lifetime facing doubters, villains, and cameras alike. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, he nodded to the audience. His steely squint met with thunderous applause. Across from him sat Joy Behar, her signature glasses in place and an expression sharpened for battle. To the audience, it might have seemed like just another spirited episode, but those who knew Joy recognized the glint in her eye. She was here to confront, not celebrate. Clint Eastwood, Joy began, voice dripping with sarcasm and defiance. Welcome to The View. It's not every day we have a cowboy grace our little table. Clint offered a small, polite smile. Well, Joy, I figured it was time to visit the ranch, he said in his gravelly baritone, drawing a warm chuckle from the audience. Joy didn't chuckle. She leaned forward, finger steepled, and fired the first real shot. You've made a career out of playing cowboys and cops who solve problems with guns. Don't you think it's time to hang up the hat and let the next generation take over? Maybe Hollywood's had enough of your type. Clint's smile barely flickered, though his jaw tightened slightly. My type? You mean someone who does his job, tells good stories, and tries not to talk down to people. Well, Joy, it seems the audience disagrees with you. A few audience members clapped, but Joy waved them off. Oh, please, she scoffed. You've been coasting on the same squint and gunman act since the 60s. Don't you think it's getting tired? Clint tilted his head, sizing her up like an opponent in a duel. Funny thing about stories that last 60 years, Joy, they're called classics. Maybe that's why people still watch them. Joy rolled her eyes theatrically, but the audience's cheers clearly irritated her. She pressed on. All right, Clint, you directed $1 Million Baby, which some critics, including me, called overrated, a film about boxing. Really? Don't you think it was just another testosterone-fueled vanity project? Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't flinch. He leaned back, folding his hands in his lap. You know, Joy, that little vanity project won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Not bad for a tired old cowboy. Huh? Laughter and applause erupted, but Joy was undeterred. She was hunting now. You see, she continued, Hollywood gives statues to men like you for telling the same story over and over. Where's the creativity? Where's the progress? Do you even care what the younger generation wants to see? Clint sat perfectly still, letting her words hang like gunpowder in the air. Finally, he spoke quietly but firmly. You're confusing trends with substance. Trends come and go. Good stories stay. Maybe you'd understand that if you spent less time yelling and more time listening. The audience gasped, and even some co-hosts exchanged wary glances. Joy leaned back, a bitter smile curling her lips. Oh, so now you're telling me to listen to a man who's glorified violence and machismo his whole life. A man whose films teach men to solve everything with fists and bullets. Clint's gaze hardened, though his composure never wavered. He leaned forward slightly, fixing her with the iconic stare that had silenced countless before her. My films teach that violence has a cost, that there are consequences to every choice. Maybe you'd know that if you actually watched them instead of reading the headlines. The audience roared, and for the first time, Joy faltered if only for a heartbeat. Oh, I've seen enough, she shot back. Her voice was sharp as broken glass. Enough to know that you're just another relic from a time when men thought the world revolved around them. This isn't your world anymore, Clint. For the first time all morning, Clint smiled, not warm, not mocking, but cold, the kind of smile you give someone right before outdrawing them at high noon. Maybe, he said, but it seems I'm still here, and you're still trying to catch up. The studio erupted in applause and gasps as Joy flushed bright red, her eyes narrowing. Clint leaned back, calm as ever, while Joy fumbled for her next attack. The producers exchanged frantic glances, wondering if they should cut to commercial, but no one moved. Everyone knew this was just the beginning. The air grew thick. You could almost hear hearts pounding beneath the applause and the uneasy silence. Joy was rattled, but not beaten. The battle of words was turning into a full-blown spectacle as she doubled down on her insults, trying everything to crack Clint Eastwood's legendary composure. As the audience settled into an uneasy quiet, Joy shuffled her cards, lips pressed into a thin line. Even the producers looked tense, fingers hovering over buttons in case this went off the rails. But Joy didn't retreat. "Oh no," she said, leaning forward, eyes gleaming with reckless determination. "Well, you seem awfully confident for someone whose entire career was built on cliches. I mean, really, Clint, do you ever get tired of playing the same old rugged, brooding, gunslinging, emotionally stunted man in every movie? Or is that just who you are?" Clint tilted his head slightly, gaze steady and cool. "You call them cliches," he said. "I call them truths people recognize. You can dress it up in fancy words, Joy, but grit and honor don't go out of style." Joy let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, please. You think grit and honor are all it takes? That's the problem with you old-school Hollywood guys. You think scowling at a camera makes you a philosopher." Clint's lip twitched, not quite into a smile. "Maybe it doesn't, but it seems to bother you an awful lot for someone who claims not to care." A ripple of laughter ran through the audience, and Joy could no longer ignore it. "All right, Fine," she snapped, flipping to another card. "Let's talk about Million Dollar Baby, a movie about a woman who, spoiler alert, gets paralyzed chasing her dream, and you, the big hero, help her end her life. Tell me, Clint, how is that empowering? How is that not just another depressing tale of a woman who couldn't make it without a man?" Clint's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping lower. "It's not about a man or a woman," he said. "It's about choices, about sacrifice, and about loving someone enough to honor their wishes, even when it breaks your own heart." His words hit like a hammer. The audience quieted, some visibly moved, but Joy pressed on, frustration boiling over. "Oh, come on. That's just more macho posturing, wrapped in fake sensitivity. You spent your entire career pretending to care while cashing checks from the same old macho fantasy machine. Don't pretend otherwise." Clint leaned forward slightly, commanding the space between them. "Pretend," he repeated, voice like steel. "Joy, you've been pretending this entire time. Pretending this is about me. Pretending it's about my movies, my career, my values. But it's not, is it? It's about you. About proving something. About showing the world how tough and righteous you are by tearing someone else down." Joy froze for a moment, then let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, that's rich," she spat. "The stoic cowboy psychoanalyzing me. I don't need you to tell me who I am, Clint. I know exactly who I am, a woman who calls out hypocrisy when she sees it. A woman who refuses to be cowed by some Hollywood dinosaur who thinks he's better than everyone else." Clint shook his head slowly, almost pityingly. "Then why do you sound so desperate to convince yourself?" he asked quietly. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Joy's face went crimson, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't sit there and act like some noble sage here to teach me about myself. You're just an actor, a lucky old man who wrote a few good roles into some undeserved legend status." Clint finally leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, utterly unruffled. "Well," he said evenly, "that undeserved legend status seems to bother you more than it does me." The studio erupted, some clapping, some gasping, some too stunned to react. Joy's voice rose above the din. "You think you're clever, don't you? So calm and collected. But underneath it all, you're just like every other man, afraid of losing relevance, afraid of becoming obsolete, afraid of someone like me telling you your time is up." Clint fixed her with a look that could silence a raging bull. "My time isn't up," he said quietly but clearly, but I can see you're running out of yours. The line cut through the room like a blade. Even Joy's co-hosts looked away, suddenly very interested in their notes. For a moment, Joy looked shaken, but she recovered quickly, slamming her cards onto the table and leaning forward, fire in her eyes. You want to play hardball, Clint? Fine. Let's talk about your precious legacy. Violence, guns, toxic masculinity. You've poisoned generations of men with your macho nonsense, and now here you sit, smug and untouchable, acting like you've done the world a favor. Clint leaned in, their faces just feet apart, his voice soft but commanding the room. Here you sit, trying so hard to tear me down and still not tall enough to reach me. The audience gasped, then fell silent. Joy sat back slowly, lips pressed tight, hands trembling slightly. Clint remained calm, composed, unbothered. The tension was so thick it felt like a storm was about to break. Clint's quiet retort left Joy visibly shaken, but only for a second. Then the storm returned fiercer than before. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a battle for dignity. Joy wasn't going to let Clint walk away with the upper hand, even if it meant burning the whole set down around them. She adjusted her glasses, jaw tight, lips pressed into a hard line as she leaned forward over the table. Oh, you think you're so clever, don't you? Her voice dropped into something slow and venomous, shedding the usual quippy sarcasm. You think that quiet little cowboy act still works, that it still intimidates people. Clint didn't flinch. He straightened his jacket and replied evenly, Joy, I don't have to intimidate anyone. You're doing a fine job of making yourself look small all by yourself. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Co-hosts stared down at their notes or avoided looking at either of them altogether. Joy's cheeks flushed crimson, but she pressed on, voice rising. You know what I think. I think you're scared. Scared the world is finally catching up, that people are realizing you're nothing but a relic of a toxic era that should have ended decades ago. Clint's eyes narrowed, calm but sharp. You keep calling me a relic, Joy, he said slowly, but what does that make you? Sitting here trying to tear down someone who's done more in his lifetime than you've done in yours. The audience erupted in gasps and whispers. Joy slammed her hands onto the table. That's rich, she barked, coming from a man who built his entire career playing the same damn character over and over, the silent, brooding brute who solves every problem with his fists or his gun. You glorified violence and called it art. Clint nodded once, a humorless smile tugging at his mouth. You're right about one thing. I've played a lot of flawed, violent men. But if you'd actually watched any of those movies past the first 10 minutes, you'd see there about what it costs a man to live that way. You're accusing me of glorifying what I've spent my career exposing. For a brief moment, Joy faltered. Then she leaned in, voice dropping into a hiss. Don't you dare lecture me about art, she spat. Your films are just excuses for insecure men to feel tough, she spat. You're nothing more than a mascot for the worst kind of masculinity. And here you are, still playing the same role in real life because you don't know how to be anything else. Clint's eyes flashed cold and hard, a storm brewing behind them. Yet his voice remained calm. You seem awfully sure of who I am, he said softly. It's a shame you haven't spent half as much time figuring out who you are. The words landed like a hammer. Even Joy's co-host stiffened in their chair. But Joy only grew louder, refusing to give him an inch. Oh, please, she scoffed, throwing her hands up. I know exactly who I am. I've spent my life standing up to bullies like you men who think they can silence women with a glare and a one-liner. I've been calling out your type since before you even knew how to say, go ahead. Make my day. Clint's gaze didn't waver. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so the entire room had to lean in to catch it. And yet, here you are, still yelling, still trying to prove something, still mistaking noise for strength. Joy froze for a moment, robbed of speech. The audience murmured, tension crackling in the air. Her hand shook slightly as she grabbed another card from the stack on the table, trying to regain control. All right, I snapped. Let's talk about your so-called masterpieces, shall we? Dirty Harry, a violent cop who breaks the law to get his way. Unforgiven, a drunk murderer painted as a hero. $1 Million Baby, a movie about a woman who dies because her dream was too big. That's your legacy, Clint. Violence, pain, failure, and somehow you're proud of it. Clint's jaw flexed once. His hands folded together on the table as he stared at her for a long moment before answering. My legacy, he said finally, voice low and measured, is telling the truth, even when it's ugly, even when people like you can't handle it. I don't make movies for approval. I make them for the people who recognize themselves in them, the broken, the struggling, the ones trying to do better. You don't have to like that, but you don't get to rewrite it either. Joy sneered, voice rising. Oh, please. You're just another old man clinging to relevance because you're too afraid to face that the world has moved on without you. You should have retired years ago. You should have left before you embarrassed yourself. For the first time, Clint stood, deliberately, his full height filling the studio. The audience gasped and fell silent. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Joy's, voice carrying to every corner of the room. Joy, he said evenly, I've never needed to chase relevance, and I don't need your permission to keep doing what I love. But you might want to ask yourself what happens when the cameras stop rolling and there's nobody left to clap for you. Joy's face blanched. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair so tightly it looked painful. For a long moment, the two just stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Then Clint straightened, buttoned his jacket, and calmly sat back down, never breaking eye contact. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew the final act of this confrontation was about to begin. No one moved. Every eye was fixed on Clint Eastwood and Joy Behar, the tension heavy, not with noise, but with the quiet certainty that something irreversible was about to happen. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a moment that could define careers and leave reputations in ruins. Joy broke the silence first, voice cracking slightly as she forced a laugh. Oh, what's the matter, Clint? Running out of clever little lines? Or are you just realizing the world doesn't revolve around you anymore? Clint didn't flinch. He rose slowly, removing his microphone. You know, he said calmly, when I walked in here today, I thought I was sitting down with professionals. I thought we'd talk about my work, my craft, maybe even have a little fun. But instead, you've turned this into a spectacle. Joy shot back, voice shrill now. You don't get to play the victim here, Clint. Not after everything you've done, the movies you've made, the messages you've sent. You don't get to act like you're above criticism. Clint held her gaze, expression unreadable. Criticism is fine, he said, voice steady. What you've done here isn't criticism, it's bitterness. And I don't have to stand here and soak up another second of it. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Clint cut her off, voice quiet yet absolute. You invited me here as a guest, and you treated me like an enemy, so I'll save you the trouble of kicking me out. He set the microphone down on the table with deliberate care. Good luck with your show, he added. But if you're wondering why people stopped coming back, you might want to replay this episode and take a good hard look. The studio went silent as Clint walked off the set, leaving Joy frozen in her chair, her face pale with a mix of rage and humiliation. As the door closed behind him, the audience erupted, some in applause, some in shocked whispers, all knowing they had just witnessed a moment that would be talked about for years. Clint Eastwood walked out with his dignity intact, leaving Joy Behar to reckon with the consequences of her own bitterness.